Hello and a very warm welcome to the Total Saints podcast. We are the weekly Saints podcast, your home for all things Southampton Football Club. This podcast is being live streamed on YouTube, Facebook, X and on Twitch. And our podcast is supported by our loyal Patreon community. Without you, we couldn't make this show each week. A huge thank you to Pitter Self-Drive for again sponsoring this episode. Pitter Self-Drive are a homegrown Southampton business. They've been trading since 1985. They also happen to be lifelong Saints fans. You might have seen their name around St Mary's. They were on the big screens yesterday. They also do loads to support the Saints Foundation. Now, they're offering cars, vans, trucks and minibus hire at very reasonable rates. They're flexible on short-term or long-term rental needs. They're always available to help, and they operate a 24-hour drop-off service. Now, they're offering TSP listeners 10% off your rental with the code Total Saints. That's all one word. And you can use that code when you're booking online or just quote the code when you're booking over the phone. To find out more or to get in touch, head to pitterselfdrive.co.uk or give them a call on 02380 474 443. If you've missed any of that information, you'll find it all in the podcast show notes and the YouTube description. So coming up this week on the podcast, Saints record their biggest win of the season against Blackburn. It's now 5 wins in a row at home. Going to review that game. I'm sure you've forgotten it already, but there was a midweek game at Coventry. Going to pick the bones out of that point away from home. And this weekend, it's a trip to Queen's Park Rangers. Going to preview that one a little later as well. My name's Martin Starke, and this is the last pod before Christmas, so please welcome our 3 wise men. We've got Steve Grant, the owner of SaintsWeb. We've got Alfie House, who's the senior Southampton reporter for the Daily Echo, and Glen is the writer of the blog League One -10. Underpinned by our TSP patrons, this is episode 256 of the Total Saints podcast. First up, our weekly shout out for the Patreon community because their monthly contributions do support the show. There are 4 tiers ranging from £5 to £20 per month. And aside from supporting the podcast, each of the tiers has different benefits. There's access to an ad-free version of the podcast. There's exclusive TSP t-shirts and merch bundles. There's the FPL as well. Plus we do events and loads more too. So if you want to get involved in supporting TSP each month, just head over to patreon.com/Total Saints podcast for more details. Again, all those links are in the podcast show notes and the YouTube description. So let's crack on with the football, shall we? Sam Edozie scored his second goal in as many games to help give Saints a convincing win over Blackburn in what was the first league meeting between the two clubs in 18 years. Alfie, I'm going to start with you this week. That was the performance that we've been waiting for, really, especially the second half. You must have enjoyed that one as much as we did.
Yeah, it was about time it clicked. And to be fair to Glen, when we did the predictions league that he obviously cares so deeply about, he said this would be the one where it finally would. And he went for a 4-1 win, I think, if my memory serves me correct. So he was a bit unlucky there.
Thank you.
A really important goal from Sam Edozie, wasn't it, to be fair, though, because I thought he was good all game. But Blackburn, the way they set up in the first half was to disrupt Southampton. You know, managers, I think John Dale Thomas did this after the match as well. They keep calling Saints like a Premier League team, but they're not a Premier League team. They don't really have proven Premier League forwards. So when they sit up like that with 10 at the back, it's not easy to break them down. And I think Sam deserved the goal. Not really what you'd expect from him to get a corner goal, but it opened the game up. And I also thought James Bree was excellent for the first half. You know, obviously Ryan Manning came out of the team because of that little bit of a mix-up on the halfway line, which we'll probably talk about when we debrief Coventry. But he was really good, not just the corner, but I just thought he opened so much space. They obviously swapped sides so that Kai went out on the left and James played on his natural right. And you just see the way he gets the ball into the box a lot more. And then in the second half, I thought Stuart Armstrong exploded completely. There was this sort of weird false 9 rotation going on with Wilson Walbone and Joe Rebo, but I thought Stuart really came to life in the second half. And loads of moments we can go through. You know, obviously Jack Stevens back is brilliant, but I will let the guys dissect Charlie Alcaraz's penalty, so I don't want to go anywhere near that. I should say I'm coming live from Dortmund as well. I've got tickets to the Borussia Dortmund game later on this week. So if the signal's a little bit ropey, I do apologise, but that's what's going on.
Live from your hotel room or Airbnb? That's not your tasteful blind behind you there.
No, the dodgy lampshade is gone, as John Hater, I think it is, will remember.
As you say, lots to get into. Steve, let's talk about the sending off, really, because I felt that when Callum Britton got sent off for kicking that ball away, it kind of changed the game. It was nonsense.
I mean, just baffling. It's a long time since I've seen such a brainless sending off. I mean, Blackburn were well in the game, as as Alfie said, they were well set up, they were well organised, which I didn't really expect them to be. Really, like you look at their results all season, there's been a lot of goals in them, so I didn't expect them to try and take that that approach against us. But I mean, in fairness, for 44 minutes, it worked perfectly. I mean, we barely troubled the keeper for most of that first half. We looked a little bit stodgy again. We were kind of fine up until we got 20, 25 yards from goal, and then didn't really seem to quite know what to do with it. And as you say, Edozie was probably the pick of the players, but yeah, it was kind of just a bit frustrating, really. And second half had kind of started in similar vein, albeit obviously with the 1-goal lead, you're not quite so concerned by it. And then Britain does what he does. Free kick's given, it's an obvious free kick, and he's just decided he's going to lump it 50 yards up the pitch after the whistle's gone, and it's just the most obvious of yellow cards. And you can see the ref walking over to him, and you can kind of imagine referees in their mind just thinking, why are you so brainless? Why are you so stupid? And yeah, it was just an easy decision. And I mean, I had a quick flick through of Blackburn forum last night, and yeah, they were all absolutely furious with him, and absolutely justifiably so. And basically, as soon as that red card came, game opened up for us. There was loads of space, and I mean, if anything, us only getting 2 goals right at the end of 8 or 9 minutes of injury time, those goals should have probably come sooner. Their keeper's been their man of the match by a country mile, but they've not really tested us much. They had the free kick in the first half, a couple of little breakaways where we were a little bit sloppy in the second, but other than that, we were just utterly dominant. And it was, yeah, I mean, that's kind of two excellent home performances back to back where we've kind of made sure of the result as well. I mean, Cardiff, as we've discussed, could have been 6 or 7 in that game too. But this one, we finally actually got a little bit more ruthless in front of goal.
I was fuming because I had 3-0 in the predictions. So when that 4th goal went in, I wasn't happy. Glenn, we talked about the first half a little bit there, but again, you know, we dominated that opening half, but we struggled to break down the defence, and we're going to have to get used to these teams coming and putting 10 men behind the ball. I think they flashed a stat up on the big screen after about 30 or 35 minutes, and we'd had, for all the possession, we'd had 1 shot on target again, and they'd had 2.
This is a theme that's we're going to revisit when we talk about the Coventry game as well. Is we don't get enough shots on target for the amount of possession that we have, basically. And yeah, like I said, we'll talk about that with the Coventry game. But with this one, I found the sort of centre forward rotation. You know, you're rotating in 3 players to the centre forward position, none of whom are suitable for playing there. And I just found that we weren't really getting anywhere. And I found the first, apart from when Sam Edozie got the ball, I found the first sort of 35, 40 minutes pretty boring, to be honest. It was a slow start to the game. Admittedly, as the guys have said, you know, Blackburn set out to make it that way. And yeah, you're right. We are going to have to get used to that, especially now as we are building up a run of home wins. I think some teams at the start of the season, like QPR, who we're playing this week, they came kind of thinking they could get something. Whereas I think more teams are going to come in now with a little bit of a fear factor because Saints have won 5 games in a row, and that's what you want. You know, you want to have that run of home results, and that's the way you get promoted. I've been banging on about that since the start of the season. You've got to win 15, 16 of your home games to have a chance, especially this season with the 2 runaway teams that we've got. So yeah, we do have to learn to play against it. After the Coventry game, Russell Martin made mention of the fact that we don't score enough goals, and they obviously, you know, he's obviously tried to come up with a plan to try something a bit different in this particular game, and yeah, limited success, I would say. But you know, we've won the game. You can only play what's in front of you, and if they're stupid enough to get someone sent off, then, you know, as Nathan Jones will tell you, it's not always easy playing against 10 men. So you have to make the most of it. And we certainly kept the foot down. And I'm relieved you're obviously going to ask someone else about the penalty because, I mean, I think we probably should have won by more in the end because that last 20 minutes, Blackburn just wanted to get on the motorway and get back home. But it was nice to see 4 goals going in, and the fact that 2 of them were late and they only had 10 men doesn't matter in the slightest. It's good for the confidence, and and it's. It's about patience, isn't it? It shows that this style of football, you have to be patient, and that's not always in plentiful supply for everybody. So, and me included at times, I have to say. But it was nice to get the job done and relatively comfortably.
Alfie, what did you make of all the shuffling of the roles yesterday and moving things around? Because obviously Che Adams dropping out of the team, and then it wasn't obvious looking at the starting 11 who was going to start up front. And then watching the first sort of 15 or 20 minutes, I still wasn't really kind of sure what was going on. It was something that we probably didn't expect to see.
I think it's probably just a result of what Glen and Steve have said, just trying to find a way to do better against teams that have got a low block, as they call it, 10 men behind the ball. So I think it's probably just a case of that, getting people onto their preferred sides in the case of James Bree. Joe Aribo, he's actually had a good week, hasn't he, 2 days? Had another good week. And I spoke to Joe at Coventry on Wednesday and asked him, what actually is your favourite position? And he said, definitely in the 8, definitely as a midfielder, box to box. And then all of a sudden, 3 days later, he's up in the box, rotating with Stuart Armstrong. So there's obviously a few things going on there. But yeah, I thought they did well. Everybody played really well. I thought there were so many people that were unlucky to not be in the shout of man of the match. But I did actually want to give a bit of a sort of a shout to Sekou Mara, because I've seen some mixed opinions on Sekou's performance today, which I think is a real surprise. I thought he was excellent. He should have scored. He should have scored immediately after coming on. They had a 1-on-1, I think, was played through by Charlie. He should have finished that. But then good trickery for the penalty to win that, which we can again skirt around. And then he was in the right place for a good finish at the back post. So, he's going to be needed, I think, because Che Adams has got his goal and it hasn't really kicked on from there. So they're going to need some firepower. So fair play to him.
You agree, Glenn? You're
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not a gambling man, but I actually put money on Che Adams to score against Coventry because I thought, he's just, as I said before, he's a streaky player, and he got the goal against Watford, and he'd hit the ground running against Coventry, and he fell flat on his face and was awful. It's just dreadful. And I thought it was quite interesting that a couple of the substitutions yesterday, Stevens coming on told Mason Holgate basically it's time to go back to Everton probably, and Sekou Mara coming on instead of Adams. I think that told a bit of a message as well, because usually it's been, there's been a pecking order, and Russell Martin has kind of stuck to that with regards to bringing substitutes on, and like, for example, Ryan Fraser was ahead of Sam Edozie to come on as a substitute, but Edozie is proving to be a better starter. So, but yeah, I thought I agree with Alfie. I think Sekou Mara did well when he came on, and he was half decent in that other game. He came on as a sub a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, like Joe Aribo, he's kind of taking his chance. Small steps. It's not as if either of them are world beaters all of a sudden, but suddenly they're looking like they're not looking like liabilities anymore, which is good, and it looks like they might actually add something as we go forward.
Steve, do you want to take the penalty?
Yeah, I'd happily take that penalty.
You're taking it better than he would.
I must admit, I did turn to the lad stood next to me. I said, I bet he tries to Penenka this. It just felt like that moment.
Were you surprised to see him grab the ball though? Because obviously Armstrong had gone off, hadn't he?
Yeah.
And I didn't know whether Carl Walker-Peters was going to grab it, or there was a conversation going on there. But
it basically looked like one of those scenarios whereby, at that point in the game, where obviously Adam Armstrong is off, I think Stu Armstrong was off at that point as well.
Yeah.
So your kind of likely takers are all off the field. So at that point, while it kind of looks like, he's just a young guy who wants to take the penalty and has gone sort of against team orders to grab it and sort of shoving people off, saying, "No, I'm taking this. I don't care what team orders are." Actually, there probably wasn't a pecking order at that point in the game because of the subs we'd made.
They've all gone off, yeah.
So no particular issue with him taking it, but yeah, it certainly felt I mean, especially with the game at 2-0, the game was effectively done. So I think from his perspective, he probably also felt there was little risk in him trying it. And I mean, in fairness, a foot lower, and it's absolutely perfect. It kisses the kisses the underside of the bar and goes in. You say, "Oh, what an incredible penalty that was!"
But that was what Russell Martin said, Steve. He said, if you're going to take that penalty, you have to score it. And that was all he said.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%. If you're gonna try the Panenka, you've got to make sure it works. Because you end up looking like an absolute mug when if you make a mess of it. I remember we played Coventry number of years ago in the Championship, the Portvleet era.
Oh, God,
we got absolutely spanked up there, and they won a penalty, and I can't remember who it was, centre back who used to take their penalties, big lump who you would have expected just to smash it, went to try and Panenka it, and Kelvin Davis just stood there and just took it in front of his face. I mean, obviously we were 3-0 down at the time, so it didn't matter, but it was kind of similar vibes really. But yeah, I think if there was more riding on the game, I'm not sure he does the same thing really. But it was
I was half joking yesterday,
but later.
It's good to find out these things before you get into a playoff final where it really matters. Yeah, I don't think if he had one, if he had one at Wembley, I don't think he'd be doing the same thing again. So it's probably good to get it out of his system now. Alfie, I know you kind of mentioned this at the start, but Jack Stevens coming back on was another really good lift yesterday. His first appearance since August. It's going to be, Glen touched on the Mason Holgate thing, but it's going to be a nice problem for the manager to have going into this busy period at Christmas.
Yeah, Russell Martin was speaking at length about Jack Stevens during the week because he obviously would say this, but he says he's just been brilliant in training. He hasn't knocked the door asking to start or anything like that. He knows that he has to wait and bide his time. It's fantastic to see him back. I thought that maybe they'd wait until Saints face Plymouth on the game after Boxing Day is like a bit of a touching moment, but there's no room for sentiment in footballers there, I suppose. Taylor Bellis apparently responded brilliantly to the substitution as well. I think I saw sort of a bit of a tussle going on the touchline when Stevens came on and Howard Bellis came off. It looked like Howard Bellis sort of walked past him and was a little bit annoyed about it, but it was actually the complete opposite. He was saying, absolutely fine, the game is effectively won. Let's get Jack back. Let's get him some minutes. But yeah, I wouldn't imagine he'll come back into the starting 11 just because Bednarek and Howard Bellis are so settled. And like I say, it's an amazing problem to have. But yeah, and Bednarek has really become Mr. Reliable for me. I think he's just so important to the way Southampton play.
But you tweeted about his passes today. Was that your?
Yeah, no. At the end of the day, passes are passes. Like he made more passes than any player has done for Southampton this season in a single game. But that doesn't mean anything really. But what it does show is that he's taken on that role. At the start of the season, it was Jack Stevens who was taking the ball from the goalkeeper and either distributing it to the left back, right back, or forward. Whereas now, since he's gone out, it's been Jan Bednarek doing that. And I just think he's so important to the way Russell Martin wants to play out the back that you really have to give him a lot of credit. And he's really come into his own in terms of leadership, and you see him marshalling the back line. So you know what, fair play to him. I think this time, 18 months ago, nobody would have thought that Jan would be playing for Southampton. I know that it's a different league and it's not the same top level, but you've got to give people their flowers.
He's not going to change it at the back, is he, Glen? At the moment, that's the two that we're going to start with at the back, and Stevens is just going to have to sit and wait for that opportunity.
You would hope so, because at the start of the season we were shipping goals all over the place, and then he's sort of found this. It's like the four, isn't it? Bazunu, the two centre halves, and Flynn Downs. Those four, to my mind, we're one of the best defensive teams in the league. Probably over the last 10 games now. Mm-hmm. So. And occasionally we throw in a silly goal like we did at Watford, but in the main, those four are reliable, and I do think that Stevens will have to sit and wait, and he's experienced enough to know that that's the case. There may be a case over this Christmas period where we have 3 games in 7 days or whatever it is, 3 games in 6 days, and then the FA Cup. I mean, of course you got that game coming up where the likes of Stevens and Holgate, if he's still here, you imagine will start, but at the moment it would take a brave / foolish man to change the centre halves, because it's that all good teams are built from the back, and we now have a solid defence. James Bree, I think, has become part of that. I think he's going to get a run of games in the side now. Now they've. I thought the experiment yesterday with the two fullbacks basically switching was good. I mean, Kyle is obviously going to provide more attacking output from the right, but when James Bree plays on the left, he offers nothing in terms of going forward. So, okay, it might saw Kyle off a little bit, but at least the opposition have got to worry about both sides of the pitch now. Whereas previously when those two played, it was just Kyle that to worry about. So
it's not like Walker Peters doesn't have experience of playing on the left.
No,
absolutely,
he's done quite a lot in the last couple of years.
Oh yeah, he's just not quite as good over there as he is on the right hand side. But
there was a period under Ralph where I thought that was his best position. I don't know if you remember. I think it might have been like January 2022. He was absolutely excellent. I think it was actually just after the Euros when Italy played Leonardo Spinazzola. Is that his name? Spinazzola?
Yeah.
It's like an inverted ballback. I thought Kyle Peters was brilliant at that.
Yeah, it's the underlapping thing that that seems to be the trendy thing for fullbacks to do. So it's not so much about getting wide and getting crosses in with your left foot sort of thing. Midfielder goes wide and plays it infield, and then the fullback runs onto it. It's quite a common thing these days. So, and obviously, as with Sam Edozie, you would think getting a run of games now on the left hand side, those two will their combination will grow. So. No, go back to the original point. I've gone off piece a little bit there. I don't see the back four really changing much unless there's an injury or a suspension in there. I don't know how we're doing with regards to totting up yellow cards and whether
we're past the 5 yellow cut off now.
Yeah.
So 10's the target. So
yeah,
Bednarek and Downs are on
both on 5,
I think.
Yeah.
So the referee. It could be his opportunity then, isn't it? Jack Stevens is going to have to wait for the FA Cup or someone to get suspended. And
now the referees have calmed down a bit. People aren't, there's not so many bookings flying around because I think
Michael Oliver about 10 minutes ago.
Oh, what? Diego, I did actually. Diego Dallo. I mean, that was more or less as stupid as the Blackburn player yesterday, but getting booked twice for dissent in the same game. Really clever. But that's Premier League. We don't care about Premier League anyway.
It'd be Russell Martin to pick up another booking, I reckon. I think he'd be sat in the stands before any of the players are missing.
He was under the impression that it was 6 bookings for a 2-match ban as a manager, and I told him at the press conference on Friday it's actually 8. So I'm a little bit worried now that I might have encouraged him. You've got a bit of breathing. I think the club secretary told him it was 6 to try and calm him down.
It's going to be kicking off. Steve, good boost for the goal difference as well. I haven't looked at the goal difference for a while, and then all of a sudden we're at +8. So that might come into play towards the end of the season as well. So we need to put teams to the sword a bit more and take those opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously we've had a pretty ropey start in that regard, in that all of our wins were by the odd goal and all of our defeats were by multiples. The fact that we've now clawed that back and we're now sort of racing away into the positive is obviously great. Just a quick look, actually, last 10 games, obviously the only unbeaten team in that 10 games, also only conceded 7 goals. So that's kind of the baseline for where we're putting all these results together from. 18 goals scored. I think looking at Ipswich and Watford have scored a couple more. We're doing all right at both ends of the pitch now. Now that we've kind of worked out what we're doing, with a bit of luck, full steam ahead.
It's going to be a busy 10 days, though, Glen. Isn't lots of games coming up? Ipswich and obviously Leeds dropping some points at the weekend, which was nice.
Ipswich are never going to beat Norwich, are they? I mean, they were never had a better opportunity, not beating them in 15 years, and Norwich are looking pretty ropey this season, and they still couldn't win yesterday.
You know why? Ed Sheeran was there. That's why.
Yeah, I did enjoy him celebrating.
Was Ed Sheeran and Elton John were at the Watford game, weren't they? That's what I think I saw this week.
Yes.
There was another game, of course, this week. Sam Edozie scoring 7 minutes after coming on to earn us a point against Coventry. It's not one that's going to live long in the memory, to be honest. I don't really know where to start with this one, Glenn. I guess team selection for you. I know you were talking about, I think you wrote about this, just not enough pace in that front 6. And I think you called that quite early on. This might be a problem. And so it proved to be.
Yeah, well, there was no Edozie, no Fraser. You had Adam Armstrong, who was the only player who could really raise a jog in that front 6. So you had Aribo, Smallbone, Che Adams, Shay Charles. So it was pretty pedestrian looking, and I was just worried it would be a bit stodgy. And the first half was awful. It was basically all possession with no goal threat whatsoever. And again, it was really boring. I thought, we controlled the possession, but Coventry always looked more dangerous than us when they had the ball, and that was my problem with it. After half time, of course, we go 1-0 down in an incident that's cost Ryan Manning his place in the team, because he was sold a bit of a putt by Aribo and Smallbone giving him the ball under a lot of pressure, but he should have done a lot better with it. And I totally agree with what Russell Martin said. It's not so much the fact that he lost the ball, it's the reaction afterwards, where he was kind of keen to show he wasn't going to foul the guy. I mean, just bring him down.
Do you think he should have taken the card?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Because once O'Hare's got the pass away to Wright, we're in trouble. We're in serious trouble. But there's another issue as well, because if you watch that goal back, Haji Wright cuts inside, I think it's Harwood Bellis, and at that point, someone else should have been, because he was obviously going to do that. Someone else should have been there. If you look at the midfield, they're just jogging back, and it was Shay Charles. So I do wonder if that's why Shay Charles dropped out of the team as well. With Russell Martin making mention of the fact we didn't react. I don't think it was just Ryan Manning; it was everybody else as well. Once we coughed up possession there. So, but after we conceded, a couple of subs on with Fraser and Edozie coming on, and we played with intent for about 20 minutes. Got the goal back, and then straight after the goal, Joe Aribo put on narrowly over, and Adam Armstrong, as he'd been doing all day, hit another one over the bar. And then we kind of almost settled for a point from 80 minutes onward. We just seemed to stop playing with any intensity. So I found that very frustrating, because I thought Coventry would bang average. I know, people have said they're as good as Watford. No, they weren't.
That's not what Russell Martin said, was it? He was.
I know.
I don't know whether that was a bit of kind of self-preservation, but he was saying, what a great team, what a great outfit, and actually, what a point of their place is a good result.
Yeah, he's got a lot of respect for Mark Robbins, which I think is probably why he said that. He wasn't going to turn around and go, Mark Robbins' team are rubbish, because he likes Mark Robbins, and that's fair enough. But I thought, I can say what I like, so I don't know Mark Robbins, and I thought Coventry were absolutely bang average, and we should have won. And I came away from that game, and obviously it's different now because we've had a good win at the weekend, but I came away from that game thinking that's the sort of game that will put us in the playoffs, rather than having any chance of catching these top two. If it was a normal season, then you'd take that point and go, yeah, that's all right. But because we are trying to chase down two teams who are 10 points ahead of us, then at the time I thought that was disappointing. But then Coventry got a point against Leeds this weekend. Yeah. So maybe it wasn't as disappointing. Maybe I was just being miserable. But yeah, it was,
Sounds unlikely.
Absolutely. Yeah. Strange occurrence there. Strange occurrence. But, we moved on. We've moved on, and we've got 3 points a weekend. So happy days.
It was another terrible spell after the break, Alfie, and I thought we'd kind of seen the back of that. There was a few games, wasn't there, where we just, after the break, things weren't clicking for us, and it kind of felt like a bit of a throwback to that. I think they hit the woodwork, did they, before the goal? There was definitely, the signs were there, weren't they? They made one mistake, and then it was almost like the same mistake again, which led to the goal. So I know he wasn't happy, but it was a poor one to concede.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, Callum O'Hare came alive, didn't he, in that sort of start of the second half? Because I thought during the first half it was Haji Wright and Ellis Sims, who they spent good money on from Everton, that would cause a lot of problems. I thought the way that they set up to sort of, again, we spoke about it, to disrupt Southampton, to play long ball from the back a little bit a few times. Haji Wright and Ellis Sims, they were beating Bednarek and Howard Bellis to quite a lot of those aerial battles. They were hounding down balls, they were quicker than the defenders, and they were causing real problems. But then, like I say, O'Hare added that little bit of quality just after the break. But yeah, I think Russell Martin was really happy with the performance. The one thing that, I didn't think it was bad at all, to be fair. I thought the performance was fine. I thought it was a tough side. It's just off the back of dropping points at Watford as well that I think made it look worse. And Russell Martin said himself he thinks that the Leeds result has put it into perspective a little bit. The thing that worried me was the lack of control in the sort of last 10 or 15 minutes. I know I sound like a bit of a Russell Martin enthusiast there by saying that, but the game was all over the place in the final 10 minutes, and nobody would have been surprised if they'd won that. And then, maybe the momentum was cut a little bit, maybe the confidence a little bit shot. So they got out of there with a point, which I think on reflection is a decent point. If it hadn't been for like Leicester and Ipswich running away with it. So yeah, I wasn't overly concerned by the performance or concerned by the result. I thought any point on the road is a decent one.
I thought, was there a great save by the keeper in like the 95th minute or something, just to keep us in it and rescue the point? So you're right, it is a point. Steve, it was a difficult watch at times, though, wasn't it? And then those subs made the impact with obviously Fraser coming on and then crossing for Edozie.
Yeah, I mean, we worked our way back into the game, having basically been given a kick up the arse by conceding, really. And it was frustrating that it took that in the second half for us to kind of wake up and start actually playing. Because, I mean, actually, first half, we created a lot of sort of half chances. I mean, I don't think the keepers actually had a proper save to make, but there's been a couple of sort of last-ditch blocks from defenders and 2 or 3 where I think Armstrong hit one narrowly over the bar, and there was another one that went just wide, and a couple of sort of other moments where we looked like, okay, right, we're forcing them back, we're creating openings, and they're basically defending last ditch. And teams can do that. You're not ever going to come up against a side that's just going to let you have it all your own way more often than not. So yeah, that sort of second half was just frustrating that it took the goal for us to kind of jolt into action. But then, having equalised, we should have then gone on to win it really, but didn't really. As Glenn said, it kind of felt like I mean, I wouldn't say that we settled for the draw really on with 10 minutes to go, because the game was just mental at that point. It was just pinballing all over the place. There was neither side had any sense of control over it, which I think kind of suited Coventry more than us, because that's kind of what we're always after, isn't it? In the game is control of the tempo and where the ball's going. But yeah, we had no control whatsoever, and that was kind of 2 games in the space of 5 days where the midfield just collapsed in a bit of a heap. Which
they ended the match with Joe Rebo as the sole defensive midfielder, didn't they? It was
I mean that was it's just a bit of a mess, really, in all honesty, and that's kind of one concern, because obviously Flynn Downs has shown that he's been a little bit susceptible to these little niggles, little illnesses, little ailments, and things like that, and he is going to miss the odd game. He's not going to be our James Ward-Prowse for this season, where he's going to play 90 plus minutes every single game. So we do need other players to step up in that position. Charles, unfortunately, hasn't really done it. The 2 games he's been given the opportunity, he was okay at Watford, I thought, but the game kind of passed him by on Wednesday, I thought, unfortunately.
I don't think Charles has got the fitness to play 90 minutes in that position. He seems to struggle a little bit against Watford. He seemed to struggle at the end of the game, and I felt the same when I was watching him play against Coventry. Yeah.
Does it just prove how integral and how important Flynn Downs is going to be, Alfie? That's 2 games that he's missed. Yeah. And then actually we're looking at we wanted a 7-point week, we got a 5-point week. Other teams have got a 9-point week, and he was the one that was really missing.
Yeah, I think like Steve says, and we know that, don't we? Nobody's surprised by that now. It's become very apparent that he is the glue, the sort of the kingpin at the bottom. I think the illness he had this week was just some kind of like neurovirus or some kind of flu, I guess, something like that. But it wasn't anything to do with his dodgy cooking, where he gave himself poisoning with chicken liver or whatever it was back in the summer. Do you know what? You touched on it in your question to Steve a second ago. But it's actually quite the phenomenon what Ryan Fraser continues to do from the bench, in my opinion, because he hasn't set the world alight in his starts. He's been passable, but when he seems to come off the bench, it's a couple of games in a row now. He does make an impact, and it's a real weapon to have. So if Sam Edozie can keep that run of games, do the first 60 minutes, cause a lot of problems for their right back, score the odd goal, to bring on a weapon like Ryan Fraser, I think it's a real luxury item.
This is the thing with him, Glenn. We've talked about Fraser for quite a bit, but actually, when he has had the start, it's not really worked for him. And it's odd where someone comes off the bench to have an impact, they set up a goal, they might get 1 or 2. You're obviously clamouring for them to start the following week, but actually we don't really, at the moment, want to see him in the team. We want to see him coming on at 60 minutes when everyone else is starting to tire.
We had a similar thing at the start of the season with Sam Ama, didn't we? Where he he looked excellent off the bench for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And it was ironically against QPR, who were playing next, where he started the game and really struggled. I think that's probably for different reasons, just being a youngster and stuff. But yeah, Ryan Fraser seems to have this weird thing of being able to do it off the bench, and I'm sure he would much rather be starting. But it's a bit of a problem for him that he continues to do so well in the last sort of 20-25 minutes of games. He adds a bit of directness, which I think we miss sometimes. I mean, Edozie provided it from the start against Blackburn, but Ryan Fraser came on, and he doesn't need to beat players. He hasn't got the skill. He hasn't quite got the skill to sort of go past players in no space like Edozie does. I always thought Edozie goes from sort of 0 to 100. He's gone, and the defender's sat on his backside. But with Fraser, he just seems to just find himself a yard of space. If you look at the goal that he laid on for Sekumara yesterday, it's just like, I'm going to find myself a yard. I'm going to put this ball across. And he seems to, he plays with brain. Not many wingers do. You know, sometimes you look at players, just quick players in general, you just think they're just quick, and then they just do everything at 100 miles an hour. He seems to, when he comes off the bench, he seems to know the right way to sort of slow down and then put the crossover and find, put the ball into a dangerous area. So yeah, unfortunately for him, I think he's going to carry on being the super sub at the moment.
Yeah, it's just a case of whether he's happy doing that for the rest of the season, I suppose. Let's do. Yeah, it does. I think he's just grateful to be in a team that's winning, isn't he, and playing again.
I think it might be quite boring to be a winger. Not boring, that's probably the wrong word, but a winger in this team, because Russell Mine is quite specific about what he wants in the final third from his winger. And it's not taking the ball with back to goal, spinning and beating the man. It's making continual runs in behind and hoping that you get it 1 in 10 or 1 in 12, which is what Adam Armstrong does so well, why he loves Adam Armstrong so much. And Sam Edozie does that. He has the ability to beat a man, and he will stand them up 1-1, but he also makes those continual runs in behind. I think when Ryan Fraser comes on, he's got that explosive pace and like a real low centre of balance, and he can really do that. So that's what he likes about him.
Even Aribo was making those runs yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not short of candidates for Player of the Week. So before we move on to the QPR game, let's do Player of the Week. I mean, I'm going to chuck Stu Armstrong in there just because it's a great game yesterday. Steve, anybody else who stood out for you over I was going to say both games, but probably yesterday, let's be honest.
Yeah, I'll say Sam Edozie got the vital goal in both games. That's kind of, I mean, especially yesterday, kind of broke the back of Blackburn's sort of all-out defence system.
Alfie?
I think if we're going on Saturday, I would give, if I had to choose one individual player, it'd be Sam Edozie for the first half and Stewie Armstrong for the second half. But I will give a shout out to James Breer, as I mentioned. I thought he really was excellent. It was a bit of a surprise to see him taking set pieces, and not all of them were brilliant, but I just thought he did so much in the game. Opened up.
That first corner was absolutely atrocious.
Exactly, yeah. But I'll give him a shout.
We will also get onto the set piece coach as well before we finish. So a couple of names, Glenn. Anybody else that we should add to that list?
As Alfie said earlier, I mean, it's Sam Edozie. No point for him for anyone else really. But Jan Bednarek, I would say, as Alfie said, the way he's stepped his game up, and it was another, 2 very decent performances. Coventry game was difficult because of the way they set up and the way they played, but I thought he stood up well. He was also excellent the previous week against Watford. So, Jan Bednarek.
Okay. Now, the last game before Christmas is the trip to QPR. It's going to be another sold-out away end, which is exciting. Steve, when we've struggled against some of the bottom half sides, it maybe won't be as easy as we would think on paper, but this should be a decent away win.
You'd like to think so. I mean, QPR obviously made the managerial change about 6 weeks ago now, I think. Gareth Ainsworth got binned off. That was never, realistically, I don't think that was ever going to work.
Who's the new manager there, Steve?
Spanish fella called Marty Cifuentes. I think I've pronounced that right.
Perfect.
I mean, he's had an impact. New manager bounce and all that, and QPR aren't cut adrift at the bottom, which is probably more than they were expecting at this stage, given the way they'd started the season. But having made that half decent start, they now kind of seem to be slumping back a little bit into old sort of bad habits. home draw against Plymouth on in midweek, where Plymouth had 10 men for I think more than an hour, couldn't score, 0-0, and they were 1-0 up at Sheffield Wednesday with 5 minutes to go yesterday, and somehow contrived to lose. So yeah, 1 point from 2 games against relegation rivals just before Christmas is not ideal when you've got a side like us coming to town. But that, I mean, let's be honest, it'll be a very different game. That QPR will go into that game with no expectations of getting anything out of it, and they will. I'm sure they will look to frustrate again.
I mean, for them, Glenn, I guess the motivation is if they win, there's a chance to climb out of the relegation zone. So you would think they would be up for it. I think their manager said, well, they just did it, and some sort of analogy about they need to keep on paddling and they just need to be in it and just trying to grind out a few results. So it's not going to be pretty, potentially.
No, and their season won't be defined by what they do against us or against the other 3 teams at the top. So they'll see it as a free hit, and they'll go for it. And if they get beat, they're expecting to get beat. So I mean they're actually decent at home for a team that's down near the bottom. I think they lost to Leicester. They haven't lost at home since they lost to Leicester, which was at the end of October. So they've put together a few results at home. So they're, I don't think it's certainly not going to be easy. But it is a game that we should certainly, fly into, thinking we're not going to give these any chance at all today. And we're going to, I mean, I don't know anything about this, Mr. Cifuentes, whether he wants to set up his team to play 10 at the back at home, or whether, naturally teams at home, they do come out a little bit more. So it'll be interesting to see what we're faced with. We will obviously have most of the ball, and it's what QPR do with it when they've got it. They got a couple of dangerous players from what I remember. Can't remember his first name. They got a guy called Chair,
Ilias Chair,
who looks pretty decent. Sinclair Armstrong, their centre forward, I thought he looked really good at St Mary's. Raw, but he looked half decent. So it's funny when I was, and obviously Ross Stewart got injured. I was thinking, what teams have we played against whose centre forward we could possibly sign, and I certainly wouldn't complain if we sort of go in for him. I thought he was decent. I don't know how many goals he's got this year or anything. He might not got any, but I thought he was a proper handful when we played him at St Mary's. So. And they've got Lyndon Dykes, who is so good he keeps Che Adams out of the Scotland squad side. But he's a big lump. So we might be faced with Coventry tactics if he plays of launching the ball back to front, and that's something for the central defenders and to deal with, and our defensive midfield players picking up the knockdowns and things like that. So it'd be interesting to see what we're faced with. But you'd think with the Spanish manager, they're not traditionally ones for sending the ball 70 yards up the pitch. So it's a massive generalisation there, I realise. So we'll be interesting to see what we're faced with. But
it's going to be a different game. This is the first repeat game, isn't it? The first repeat fixture. So this is going to be a bit different to the game that we saw at St Mary's. From memory, Alfie, that wasn't a classic, but we managed to grind out a win. But 2 very different sides now. I don't think we can learn too much from that earlier matchup in the season.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I don't know much about QPR either. Same as Stephen Glen know more than I do. You've reminded me of Sinclair Armstrong there. I agree with you. I thought it was excellent in that first game, but it won't be easy. No game is, but these are the games you have to win, right? So where we look at Watford and we look at Coventry, and I can sit there and say, well, a point at them is actually a pretty good point. QPR, you have to go to Loftus Road and win. What I will say, though, is the atmosphere, I think, is going to be fantastic because the away fans at the moment are brilliant. I did Franny Benali's column on Thursday for his, obviously for the Echo, and we finished talking about Saints, and then about 10 minutes after we finished, he just texted me saying, actually, I've just forgot something we need to get about the fans in because they've been fantastic, selling out away ends. I presume QPR sold out a long time ago.
Are you going, Steve? Is that you going to that one?
Yes, I am. Yep, looking forward to that. Probably our second most expensive away game this season, I think.
How much are they charging?
37 or 38 in the upper tier, I think. I've gone. It's weird because the upper tier at Loftus Road is a very strange structure in that you only actually get a proper view of all of the pitch in the front 3 rows of the upper tier. if you're any further back, then you basically can't see the goal line underneath you, which is obviously not ideal especially when you're kicking towards that goal. So yeah, it's a very strange away end. So I went for lower tier tickets just so I can kind of see everything. And yet strangely the lower tier tickets were cheaper. So yeah, mine was only 31. So it's but it's expensive game, this, isn't it?
Yeah. So Glenn, who, in terms of like who we put out and who starts, do you think he's going to have a mind on the fixtures? They were talking about all the fixtures that are coming up at Christmas. Do you think there might be a few surprises, or does he stick with the team that finished on Saturday against Blackburn, but without Fraser because we leave him on the bench and bring him on? There's a few headaches there, isn't there?
Yes and no. I think he more or less knows. Well, he certainly knows his defence. I honestly can't see too much messing around. I don't think there's anyone sort of clamouring for inclusion. Will Stuart Armstrong manage to play all these games in a row? He seems okay at the moment. I thought Charlie Alcaraz apart from the penalty, he was obviously trying really, really hard to do something in yesterday's game when he came on, having been dropped after being pretty ropey at Watford, wasn't it? He was terrible in that game.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are a few who can come in and make a difference. Joe Aribo seems to be fairly settled. It'd be tough for him to be left out at the moment. So
do you think he'll start up front though? Do you think he's starting that false nine? Can you see us like rotating all the three around again?
I don't know. I mean, we still have an issue with who plays centre forward. Adam Armstrong was incredibly quiet, I thought, in the game yesterday.
Yeah.
So the forward line, there are still questions there, and that's why someone like Sekou Mara needs to keep playing, because there is a place up for grabs. Until Ross Stewart gets fully fit, if he ever does, there is still a place up for grabs for someone to play as the centre forward. But I would imagine we'll do more or less exactly the same as we tried against Blackburn, where it'll be, the rotating players into that number 10, false 9 position, whatever you want to call it, and Armstrong and Edozie as the two furthest forward.
Do you think that experiment worked, Alfie? Do you think we'll see that again?
I think every game will have different tactical demands, to give you a very mundane and politician's answer.
Press conference answer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, look, I mean, I think it'll be the same 11. They may play slightly differently, but I probably would go unchanged as a general rule.
Okay, let's try and do some score predictions on this. If you're watching the live stream, then you can stick your prediction in the comments, and we can see those. We can share some of those. Steve, do you want to start as you're going to be there?
Yeah, I think ultimately this is the sort of game where you've got to stamp your authority on it and make a fast start, and the game becomes very, very, very easy sort of beyond that. So first big away win, I think 3-0.
Nice. Okay. Glenn, you confident as well?
Yeah. I'm going to go 4-1 again.
not 4-0.
Not because I think it will happen, but because we did that last week. So yeah, no, I'll same as Steve. I fancy us at the moment to just have something about us to put teams away now. So yeah. Famous last words, but I'll go for that again.
Start helping the goal difference. I'm seeing a lot of 2-1s popping up on the comments. Alfie?
I think 4 of their last 6 games have been 2-0, so I will go for another clean sheet. I can't even count how many clean sheets that will be for Saints this season, which is just remarkable. I think it's 5 or 6 potentially, so I'll go 2-0 win.
Would that be no, it wouldn't. I was going to say, would that be 3 in a row, but it wouldn't, would it? No. But okay, clean sheet. All right, nice. Couple of other bits that I just want to touch on. I know, Alfie, you've been reporting on this today. The Saints set piece coach. There was a time yesterday when I was watching some of those offensive free kicks thinking, has he started yet? Is he here? But
they were offensive.
They were pretty offensive. Yeah, the set piece coach it looks like he might be off, and he only arrived in August, so that wasn't probably part of the plan.
No, probably not. I mean, I, like everyone else, I learned at the same time when it was reported in Norway, but I just asked the question of a couple of people and just sort of got the latest on it. So it sounds like he's going to be taking over as manager of a Norwegian club, Lillestrøm, I think it is. It's not done yet. It's not finalised, so that may change, but you can't really step in the way or stand in the way of somebody wanting to become the main man at a club, I imagine. But I actually think that they've been really good on set pieces, I think, Southampton this season. I think they've scored a couple of important goals. They, for my money, they haven't conceded too many from set pieces. And me and Glenn obviously went to that tactical evening, and I thought that Andreas spoke really well. He was an interesting guy, clearly very passionate about it. He's worked at some really big clubs, obviously Arsenal. So I think he will be a miss, and the club are now working out what they do in terms of replacing him. Do they bring somebody new in? But I do think it's a loss. Genuinely, I think he's got a good CV in football. I know he hasn't been here long, but I think they've been really positive on set pieces.
Is that a blow, Glenn? Having listened to the guy talk and see how we've done, because defensively definitely steadied the ship since he came in.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Alfie. When he spoke at the tactical evening, was it in terms of? I think the question was, why don't we ever leave a player up front when we're defending?
Yeah, it was why 10 men in the box. Yeah,
something like that. So. Didn't really touch on attacking set pieces. And
Are you allowed to tell us? Are you allowed to tell us this, or is this still under the embargo of the evening? Is this?
I don't know.
I mean, it's just a mixture of zonal marking and man marking. In fact, there's no real magic to it. He goes into a lot more specifics than that, but it's basically just effectively moulding hybrid zonal and man marking to defend the box.
But he didn't really touch on sort of like attacking set pieces. So I don't really know sort of like what his influences has been there, or whether that's even part of his remit. I mean, it was interesting for all our pretty passes yesterday. We scored a goal through lumping a corner in the box and someone flicking it in the net. So
off of his thigh,
off his thigh, whatever. So it's a strange one. But I mean, you can never really tell the sort of impact of coaches behind the scenes. If they hadn't released his name when he joined, then no one would be really asking questions. You would have just assumed that. I mean, we used to have a goalkeeper doing it, didn't we?
Yeah, Dave Watson. Yeah,
Dave Watson. So which was one of the more bizarre things I've heard coming out of the football club in recent times. But
we did for England, didn't we, in the 2014 Euros?
Yeah, very strange. It's pretty easy being a set piece coach when you've got James Ward-Prowse taking them, isn't it? But
they still managed to muster very little from them in the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, from corners especially. So, but yeah, I mean, he's a guy that's been brought in with a decent CV. Russell Martin obviously wanted in there, so the short answer is yes, it will be a loss for him to go. And you would assume, unless he's passed on every single bit of his knowledge already in his 6 months or whatever, that they will want to replace him.
Do you think there's anyone left at Swansea, Steve? We can go and get this. Have they got a set piece coach?
Well, I mean, have they got a legal department to tell us to go elsewhere at this stage?
Probably not going to happen.
Yeah,
but any coach leaving when a team is doing well is going to be a bit of a blow. But we've seen, I think, over the last year, staff come and go, haven't we? So it's been. I
always think the sort of the backroom staff that kind of a sort of a level down from sort of the manager's immediate sort of right hand men. They're the ones that you would all kind of assume are sort of slightly more expendable, really, and you don't quite rely on them to the same degree. So theoretically, you should just be able to go and find somebody else who is kind of renowned for set piece coaching. Then, I mean, there must be plenty of them now. It's where you get into this level where teams have got throw-in coaches. There must be plenty of guys out there who are sort of well renowned as specialising in set pieces, both attacking and defending. So
Neil Warnock.
I mean, he's available.
Oh God! Could you imagine? Last week I mentioned that as it was Christmas, we were doing shout outs for anyone who leaves us a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. I have to say hello to the Real Beast, I think it is BEEST, who says always well worth a listen. It's like spending an hour in the pub with your mates. TSP is the perfect mix of curmudgeonly middle-aged mirth and youthful enthusiasm. Middle-aged mirth.
I wonder who the youthful enthusiasm is.
I don't know. I mean, I'm tempted to say, split it down the middle. And you can draw out your own conclusions as to who is who there. If you do get a bit of time over Christmas,
I think I know.
and you're bored, you can head to Apple Podcasts, find the Total Saints podcast on there, leave us a rating and a review, because that is always very much appreciated. That's pretty much all we've got time for this week. Thanks again to Pitter Self Drive for sponsoring this episode. They offer cars, vans, trucks, and minibuses for flexible short-term or long-term rentals with a 24-hour drop-off service. They're also offering TSP listeners 10% off your rental with the code Total Saints. That's all one word. You can use that code when booking online, or just quote the code when you're booking over the phone. You can find out more if you head to pitterselfdrive.co.uk or give them a call on 02380 474 443. Don't forget, you can also follow Total Saints Podcast on all the social media platforms. It's at Total Saints Pod. We do love hearing from you, so you can drop us a DM or you can email us via the website. It's great to get your opinions too. You'll also find us on Patreon. We mentioned this at the start. That's where you can support the podcast with your monthly contribution. If you head to patreon.com/Total Saints Podcast, you'll find out more on there about the 4 tiers that we have, ranging from £5 to £20 per month. And each of the tiers comes with its different perks, including the weekly shouts for the patrons in our Francis Benali and our Mick Shannon tier. So thank you to Dave Melton, Mark Atkins, Andy Hollis, Anthony Thompson, Saints in Exile, Gavin Ford, James Harron, Nicky Nicholson, Southampton NY, and Drew Dyer, who are all in our Francis Benali tier. And also thanks to Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy, Nick Higston, Phil Cook, Matt Rose, Nick Reed, Paul Stewart, Phil Horstrop, Matt Hall, and Mark Littlewood, who are in our Mick Shannon tier. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Alfie. The next pod is going to be the final one of the year. That's going to be on Saturday, the 30th of December, and it's going to be at 8 o'clock. So get that reminder in your phone to join us Saturday, the 30th at 8 o'clock. Thank you for watching this week. Thank you for listening. Have a fantastic Christmas, won't you? And let's hope that we pick up plenty of points.